There are moments in every royal family's history that never appear in official records. Conversations that happen behind closed doors. Decisions made in silence. Requests that can change the future of a monarchy forever. This is one such story. Inspired by public figures but entirely fictional, today's story imagines what might happen if King Felipe made one final request to his daughter, Princess Leonor, and for the first time in her life, she simply refused. Let's begin. The corridors of Zarzuela Palace were unusually quiet. Outside, photographers waited beyond the gates, hoping for a glimpse of Spain's future queen. Inside, however, no cameras were allowed. No advisors were present. No royal staff interrupted the silence. King Felipe stood alone in his private study, looking through the large window overlooking the palace gardens. On his desk rested a single folder. It contained plans for the coming years. State visits, military ceremonies, international diplomacy, and one final decision that only Princess Leonor could make. He took a deep breath before asking his secretary to invite his daughter. Minutes later, Leonor entered the room. She wore a simple navy suit instead of ceremonial attire. She smiled politely. "You wanted to see me, father?" Felipe nodded. "Please, sit." The words sounded heavier than usual. Leonor immediately sensed something different. Her father wasn't acting like the king. He was acting like a father carrying an impossible burden. For several moments neither of them spoke. Finally, Felipe opened the folder. "There is one last request I need to make." Leonor listened carefully. "I've spent years preparing you for the throne," he began. "I've taught you protocol, responsibility, discipline, but there is one tradition I hoped you would continue." He slid a document across the desk. It described a long-term strategy that would shape the monarchy for decades. The plan required Leonor to dedicate nearly every aspect of her future to preserving royal stability. Where she lived, how she traveled, who she spent time with, how much of herself she revealed to the public. Every detail had been carefully arranged. Felipe looked into her eyes. "If you follow this path exactly, the monarchy will remain strong." Leonor read every page, slowly, carefully, without interruption. When she finished, she quietly closed the folder. Then she looked at her father. "I'm sorry." Felipe waited. "I can't do this." The words landed like thunder. For a moment the room became completely still. Not because she had shouted, but because she had spoken with complete certainty. King Felipe had expected questions. Negotiation, perhaps hesitation. He had not expected a simple no. "May I ask why?" he said calmly. Leonor leaned forward. "You've spent your entire life protecting the crown." "Yes, and you've sacrificed more than anyone will ever know." Felipe remained silent. "But if I accept this plan," she gently touched the folder. "I'll spend my life protecting an image instead of serving people." Felipe frowned slightly. "The two are connected. They don't always have to be." He looked away. Leonor continued. "The world has changed. People no longer trust perfection. They trust honesty." Felipe slowly stood and walked toward the window. "When I became king," he said quietly, "our greatest responsibility was protecting the institution." Leonor nodded. "I know. But today," she replied, "our responsibility is earning trust every single day." The king closed his eyes. Those words stayed with him. Because somewhere deep inside, he knew she might be right. The conversation lasted for hours. Neither raised their voice. Neither became angry. Instead, they challenged one another. Felipe described decades of public pressure, constant scrutiny, political crises, moments where one mistake could damage the monarchy forever. "You think transparency solves everything?" Leonor answered gently. "No, I think hiding everything creates bigger problems." Felipe sighed. "There are realities people aren't meant to see." Leonor smiled sadly. "They already imagine worse." That sentence echoed throughout the room. The king had witnessed it himself. Rumors often grew larger than truth. Silence frequently became suspicion. Still, he wasn't ready to abandon everything he believed. "There must be limits," he insisted. "There should be," Leonor agreed. "But those limits shouldn't stop us from being human." As evening approached, palace staff quietly lit the hallway lamps. The meeting continued. Eventually Felipe asked the question he had avoided all afternoon. "If you reject this plan, what replaces it?" Leonor opened her own notebook. She had prepared something different. Not because she expected this meeting, but because she'd been thinking about the future for years. Her vision wasn't about making the monarchy seem distant. It was about making it understandable. More visits to ordinary communities. Greater openness about charitable work. Less emphasis on ceremony. More emphasis on listening. Not abandoning tradition, but allowing it to evolve. Felipe read every page, slowly, exactly as Leonor had read his. Neither interrupted the other. When he finally looked up, his expression had softened. I don't agree with everything. I know, but you've thought this through. I have. The king smiled faintly. You sound older than I was at your age. Leonor laughed quietly. I had a good teacher. For the first time that day, Felipe laughed too. The tension eased, yet one final issue remained. The council won't like this. I know. Some will say you're changing too much. They probably will. They'll blame me. Leonor looked directly at him. No, they'll blame me. Felipe stared at his daughter. She wasn't asking him to protect her. She was protecting him. That realization touched him deeply. He remembered holding her hand as a little girl, teaching her how to greet diplomats, watching her first public speech, seeing her military training. Every step had prepared her for responsibility. Now, she was demonstrating something he couldn't teach. Independent judgment. Perhaps, that was the final lesson. Not obedience. Wisdom. Night had completely fallen outside. The folder still rested on the desk. Neither of them reached for it. Finally Felipe picked it up. He looked at the cover one last time, then quietly closed it. I suppose, this isn't my decision anymore. Leonor's eyes filled with emotion. No, he smiled warmly. It shouldn't be. A long silence followed, not an uncomfortable silence. The peaceful kind. The kind shared between two people who finally understand one another. Before leaving the room, Leonor stopped at the door. Father. Yes. Thank you. For what? For giving me the chance to say no. Felipe smiled. I wasn't thanking you for refusing. She waited. I was thanking you for having the courage to answer honestly. Leonor nodded, then quietly left the room. The king remained alone. He looked once more toward the palace gardens. For years he had believed leadership meant holding on. Perhaps, real leadership sometimes meant letting go. The next morning, palace officials noticed something unusual. Several sections of the long-term strategy had disappeared. Not destroyed, simply replaced. New ideas, new priorities, new language. The changes reflected both experience and hope. The wisdom of a father. The vision of a daughter. No public announcement explained what had happened. No headlines revealed the conversation. History often remembers ceremonies. It rarely remembers private moments that quietly shape the future. But if anyone had looked through the palace window that evening, they might have seen not a king losing control, but a father discovering that his daughter was finally ready to lead in her own way. And perhaps that had been his true final request all along. Not that she follow his path, but that she find the courage to create her own. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this fictional royal story inspired by public figures, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, remember that the greatest acts of leadership often begin with the courage to speak the truth, even when that truth is simply one word. No.